Hello, Leif. Welcome to the Right Opinion podcast. Very happy to have you here. For those of you that don't know, Leif is my mentor. He's been looking over the first draft of my first ever novel, so I'm very excited to have him here as a guest with me today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm quite enjoying your novel. Looking forward to getting back into it. We had a little break
Oh,
there.
oh, I'm very happy to hear that. Hopefully you like the ending too. But
I'm
why
looking
don't we
forward.
start off why don't we start off with you telling me and us a little bit about yourself and your writing career?
All right. Well, I'm a writing professor. I've been teaching for 25 years now. Writing. I've been writing since I was about 12. I've been obsessed with writing. Uh, Started from a love of reading, and then I was like, I think maybe I want to try this. So, just writing stories when I was a kid. I still have some. Of course, they are delightfully awful. But that's when you're learning what you're doing, it's a lot of imitation, a lot of trying to figure it out. So I've continued writing my whole life with brief hiatuses here and there while life got in the way, but pretty much been writing steadily, which is a dangerous thing to say because then people expect your writing to be really good, right? You've had all these years of practice. But I had a major life change in my 30s, positive life change, and it changed my writing completely. And after all that writing, only since my 30s, late 30s, do I feel like, and I'm 51 now, do I feel like that I've really started to say the things I want to say in writing. It seems like it takes so much time to figure out who you're not as a writer before you can settle into who you are. Been my experience anyway.
Interesting. Because I'm obviously a young writer. I'm a little bit younger than you, and I haven't been writing for nearly as long. I haven't been I think I've been alive for the amount of time you've been writing for. Now that I think about it, so I'm
Fair enough.
curious actually to how you kind of went through that process and what was kind of maybe like the defining feature of finding out that hey, this is me as a writer, because we've got some young writers that are going to be listening, so it's an interesting process. I'd love to hear about it.
Oh man, that's a good question. For so long as a writer, I felt like I was trying to dial in my voice. I felt like I took myself too seriously. So I was like, I have to find this voice, but then when I was realistic with myself, I found that it was all derivative. I was always imitating another voice or conglomerating other writers and their style, which is healthy actually. I see that now. So young writers, there's actually a phenomenon when you're really into reading someone and you start writing. It's natural to find yourself imitating that person a lot in your writing, and a lot of people give up at that point. But and this applies to my overall story you're asking about, and that is I call it. You could do something called boiling it off later. Like if you feel like you're onto something and you're writing, and you go, "Oh, this is pretty derivative," but you feel it. It tugs at you. There's some core about it that you're into that you feel. Go with it anyway, because that's what the editing stage is for, right? You can boil off all the influence and the derivative stuff and keep. Of course, all writing is derivative since the first person wrote, and that's the balance is trying to figure out how do I have my original voice. So it took a lot of learning to forgive myself, to be patient with myself, that I wanted to be that writer who who starts out at a young age and is like this prodigy and this brilliant writer, and those people exist, but I think a lot of writing is just slogging away at it. Somebody once said, I hate to write, but I love to have written." Because the slog is just like I said. I put in years and years and years of writing stuff that just didn't quite. And of course, I was different as a person. In my 30s, when I had this major life change, it was a whole worldview change, a whole way of looking at the universe change for the
Mhm.
better. But I feel like I settled more into who I am in my life. And so I was able to settle more into who I am as a writer. Not that I've got that completely dialed in. I sort of feel like that's a lifelong process. I don't know if that answered your question.
I think it does. So what I'm hearing is, I guess the advice to the young writers is if you end up kind of imitating some of your favorite writers, totally okay. That's what the editing stage is for. You're going to revise and you're going to make it better and make your own voice stand out. It's going to help you figure out your own voice and
Mhm.
forgive yourself for not necessarily maybe from the first get go writing exactly what you think you need to be writing or writing. Just go for it, and you'll eventually settle into who you are as a writer and what you need to be writing.
Right, because I feel like what I look back on it now and think is I was auditioning all these ways of writing. I was trying things out, and like, yeah, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's born lucky and has their original writer's voice and takes off with it. And but I think for most of us, it's trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. I try to tell my students like this idea that writing. See, when I was younger, I felt like I was an artifact. When I wrote something, it needed to be just so. And really, I didn't even respect the editing phase because I thought if it doesn't come out like it's supposed to, then really, what's it worth? Especially with poetry, it took
Yes.
me a long time with poetry. Like I was supposed to write it once, and the meter's good, if there's rhymes, it's perfect, all this stuff. Man, it's just the truth is, it's just writing is just trial and error and discouragement and encouragement. And I don't want to make it sound negative. I love it, but it's just a lot of work. They say you have to do 10,000 hours or something to be an expert at it or whatever that
Yeah.
phrase is. I feel like I put in 10,000 hours into writing, and a lot of it trash. Not because it was necessarily terrible, but it was not what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it. I found that very frustrating in my youth. Mhm.
I empathize with that because obviously being a young writer who's really for the first time in her life trying to uh, put my all into this. I have those days where I write something or my plot is falling apart and I'm thinking to myself like this is all so awful. Why would I do this to myself? And I want to quit and I hate it. But I like you mentioned that obsession is there. I actually call it an affliction because I feel like it's just something that most of us have been affected with since we were kids and it's almost like this yeah, this is obsession, this insane feeling of like I have to do this no matter what. And I feel like all the really good writers, at least from what I can tell, have always felt like that. And
Yeah.
they're gonna do it whether they're broke, whether they're rich, whether it's going really well, everybody's reading it, nobody's reading it. Like it's just this one thing that once it gets its claws into you, you're not going away. Like it's just
Yeah.
you're stuck with
Well,
it.
having said that, I also think of a young writer who does like I did, which is like felt bad about myself a lot that I wasn't disciplined enough. Like I would hear writers say things like I must write. And it turns out, looking back, I did feel that way, but I felt guilty that I wasn't writing enough. Like that's what I say about self forgiveness and patience with the self. It's like I felt like all those years that I wasn't doing enough. I was never hitting it as hard as I should be, um, and that in itself is a problem. Yeah, well, even as I'm writing, sometimes now, for instance, to put it in a micro scale, I sometimes when I'm writing now, I realize this paragraph sucks. Like I'm lost, but then I remember where was I headed, and I just go ahead and write the bad stuff. And so let it be bad. I mean, I can again the editing process, is so important. I can go back and edit out the bad stuff, but sometimes I need to just write the bad stuff as a bridge to get to that next part that I need to get out of me. And it seems like I can't skip to it. The brain is weird. So I'm like, I can't just skip to the good part. I feel like I have to arrive there. So go ahead and write the bad stuff. It's not permanent. And it's not an artifact that you're supposed to just plop out at once. It is this straining, yearning, sort of dialing it in, hacking it apart, reshaping it thing. So there has to be some freedom and confidence to write badly. I tell my students all the time, most of you are not writers. You have to become a bad writer before you can become a good writer. They want to skip right to good writing. And there are geniuses out there who do that, I'm sure, but for most of us, you just got to write badly first.
That is some excellent sage advice. Write the bad stuff and edit it out later, and you'll figure it out eventually. Which I
Yes,
have
yeah.
to think about as well, because I definitely am a perfectionist, and I think about how if this isn't absolutely perfect the first time I write it, what's the point? I'm clearly not cut out for this. But
Right.
I'm even through this novel that I just finished. I'm thinking back on it, and I'm thinking about all the parts already that I'm gonna cut out that I can imagine that are just gonna have to be tweaked and everything. And kind of going through this process of the last year of really just finishing this novel, I'm coming to realize everything you're saying. Like it's just whatever didn't work, just hit backspace, delete it, keep the good stuff, add a few more good stuff, and it'll be okay. I hope.
Yeah. And I've even got to the point where I don't delete much. What I do is I start once a project is actually underway, I start a separate file that I call orphans. And these are like sections, sentences, paragraphs, whatever that is like that doesn't have a home. But I never know later when I'm going to come to around to a place in the project I didn't envision. I got a well to go to there. A lot of it just ends up not being used, of course, but it's psychological too. Like I try not to disrespect any of my writing, even the terrible stuff. Like it's so informative to have that, even if it's just in a file where I can go, I did that, I did that. But it's a reminder in an odd way, it's uplifting rather than to me. For me, it's uplifting rather than discouraging to keep myself in check with. Because if you think about it, it's an odd form of self-deprecating ego to go. Everything I write must be perfect. That perfectionism, it can be deadly to writing.
Yes.
Really, it can
I can
make
be
you
deadly
abandon
to,
projects.
yeah, to anything really. I
Mhm.
just art, I feel like in general, I mean, school, like I was kind of like that in school. If I didn't get all A's or if I had one bad test or something, or even I knew other people who were like that too. They were like, "Oh my god, I need to change my degree. I'm not cut out for, what I want to go to medical school later. I'm not cut out for it because I got a C on one genetics test." And, it's like overall grand scheme of things, it's not actually that bad.
Well, and I'm not a sculptor, but so if you know more about tactile art than I do, I can be corrected, obviously. But I doubt that most sculptors do the sculpture the first time. I'm sure they have models and they have marble they threw out back with a string of cuss words because they hacked it until it was misshapen and couldn't use it anymore, and they probably went and drank and laid around and felt terrible about themselves. But I don't think. I doubt there's many sculptors who just got a piece of marble, chink, 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 done. But we can see that when it comes to other things, even like, say, designing a car. So nobody sits down in those places that design cars and designs a car from scratch. Boom, done. You start, you stop. Here's my car. That's just not realistic, and we wouldn't expect it of any creative endeavor. And yet, we as writers expect it of ourselves.
That's yeah, it's weird. It's like this weird, yeah, this odd belief that it has to be perfect the first time. And to add on to your example, the car example, I know with SpaceX, the first, I think it was either five or six rocket ships that they built, like completely blew up. They didn't make it into orbit at all. They just were complete failures. And then it was only the sixth or seventh one that was the golden child that actually did what it was supposed to.
Yeah.
So, it's like, okay, you're gonna have to write maybe six drafts of your novel before you hit the seventh draft. That's the perfect piece of work that you can finally put out there. So, if Elon Musk is out there failing and paying hundreds of thousands of dollars and he's okay, I think you'll be okay with your writing. I feel to those of you that are
And
discouraged.
one of my heroes as a writer is Flannery O'Connor. We don't share a worldview, but I loved her writing anyway. And one of my favorite stories by her is Good Country People, and I think I read somewhere that was the 22nd draft of that story, which she pointed out feels like when you read it that it took no effort at all. But 22 times I think I read that how many drafts she did of that story.
That is unimaginable for me right now at the stage that I'm in. I'm like kind of dreading the second draft already, but that's okay. 20 more drafts to go after that. But that's kind of the whole point, right? Like I know there's a quote. I never remember who said it, but they say, the first draft is to kind of just get everything out on the page, and the second time you do it, you kind of make it look like you knew what you were doing the entire time, even though you didn't.
Right.
And so
I
that might
didn't.
take 10 drafts or 22 or 5, and no one's going to know when the book comes out. No one's going to
Right.
know that it took you 17 drafts in 3 years to do it.
Yep. And you feel like a fraud, especially when you're younger. You feel like a fraud. I did. Like, oh, it's a secret that I had to do all this messing with it because when I wrote it in the fever, and I think this is a good thing, when you're writing in a fever, it feels perfect to you. It's like, boom, I'm getting this down. But I think what you're feeling there is the beats. You're feeling the ideas come together. But of course, when you're in that zone, that even can detract from you leaving, leave words out of sentences, or you got a clunky sentence because you were trying to get to the next sentence, but you're so in the fever, you didn't feel that bridge. And then later when you go back, you can feel like a fraud because I didn't get it right the first time. And if people knew how much work I had to put into this, then it wouldn't be as impressive and all this. It's weird when we get these these notions about creativity, but I guess that's part of what makes us creative people.
I can see why you're an English teacher. I like it. You're just like very uplifting and motivating, and you've got the experience behind you to remind all of us that we're all in the right place. We're going through the right steps, and that nothing that we're feeling is it's not normal. Like, it's normal to feel like a fraud. It's normal to think
Yes.
that, oh, this has to be perfect, but it's not, and have that self doubt. But, eventually you kind of get some writing behind you and you realize that, hey, I can actually do this and it's not so bad.
Yeah, well, I'm an actor also, and one of the things that is so hard to dial in because you're trying to dial it in is authenticity. People want authenticity. They don't want to see you acting and putting on a show. There's a certain kind of very performative acting that's about presentation, but when you're talking naturalistic acting and stuff, people want to see authentic you. They want to see you struggle to dial in this character. And I think in writing it's the same way. People don't expect perfection actually. Uh, I don't know if you know what I mean by when you have a final draft that people can tell you struggled to get to say it just right. Not the kind of struggle where they're distracted by it, but it feels like this every word means something and it all ties together and is a unit. That takes a lot of struggle. It takes a lot of rethinking and rewriting and discouragement and encouragement. And I think people can sense that in writing and they like it. Rather than people thinking you're a fraud or a failure, the fact that you struggle with it means it's important to you. And if it's important to you, that's going to come across on the page, or at least it has more of a chance of coming across on the page than just writing something because you have to or for money and those kinds of things. Those always end up different.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned this. People will notice if you're kind of like a fraud, and it's gonna come out. There's some controversy in the I guess book talk community. I actually don't have a TikTok, so I get all my news elsewhere. But I know that there's some controversy with a young author. Her name is Alex Astor, who wrote Light Lark. I don't know if you've heard about her at all,
I don't think so.
but she's written like a sci-fi book. She made some claims about it on TikTok. It was supposed to be a Hunger Games slash, I think it's Court of Roses and Thorns. Forgive me if that's not the right title. I've never read the book, but it's like, so it was supposed to be like kind of like a mix of those two with more POC characters. And she kind of marketed like that on Book Talk. And then some ARC readers got the initial copies, and she had texts that she'd promoted on TikTok that wasn't in the final version of the book, and now everyone is just very upset. They are digging deep into her background and like her privilege and how she has like a movie deal coming out now, and it's like, oh, her parents paid for a bunch of stuff. It's very dramatic right now, but I just makes me think of that, of how like if you're not authentic, people are gonna see it, and with the internet, they're gonna hunt you down for it. They're not just gonna
Yeah.
be like, oh, this writer, you can tell that they didn't put their heart and soul into it. They are gonna come for blood.
Yes. And authenticity can be it can be defined in lots of ways. It could come across in lots of ways, I should say. Like your novel, if you don't mind me talking about it, I won't give anything away, but it's kind of a genre novel, and yet I sense the authenticity when I read it. That's what it's one of the things that hooks me about it as I'm reading. Is it you don't feel like that you're trying to imitate to the point of not having anything to say. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I feel like you have things to say. You're putting them through the lens of a genre novel, but you're also not kidnapping the novel for things you want to say as a person. So you're striking this nice balance there, which I think is one of the things we're talking about. This authenticity. You can write in any genre for any purpose, and I find when I write things that I have to write professionally or whatever, it's more fun for me, and it usually ends up better writing if I allow myself the time to breathe and to really dive myself into it, even if that means I got to burn off a lot of it before I present it. And so I will, I will just let it all hang out, even in a professional writing, and then I can go back and chisel away at it later. But that gets that authenticity onto the page. That I found that when I have a writing assignment of any sort, I've got to give myself like 5 false starts.
Hmm.
Sometimes whole pages of stuff. I'm like, I got the intro, and then I'm like, oh, that's not going to work at all. Back to the drawing board.
Uh, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for said your kind words on my writing, because that obviously is very nice to hear that you think so, like that you think it is authentic. I mean, I definitely try that. I have, I guess for me, I guess it kind of, I don't care in the sense that I care about my writing, but I don't necessarily care about I have to write it in for a specific audience. I know publishers now, and even everyone's like, you have to find your target audience, you have to find what they want to read about, and then like kind of craft your story around that. And to me, that is to me kind of sounds the way to be inauthentic, because I'm like, I have my story and I'm gonna write it in the way that will get across what I want to say. And I believe that my story will find the readers that want to read it, and that like my voice, like my thoughts, my story. And I think, if like I said, that authenticity is going to come through a lot more than, obviously I'm going to do, research and what this, I've like I told you, I read so many books in the same genre that I had an idea kind of what people were expecting, but I wanted to put my own twist on it. I took what I didn't like, what I did like, and tried to make my own version. And that just right, I write what you want to read, I guess, is one of the things that people say. I'm basically do that, and I'm just, my philosophy is like, the readers that will be found, like my story will find the readers that will like that. And I don't really want to, I feel like if I'm going to write for an audience and I'm going to have to tailor it specifically to them, then I'm going to be really miserable and be a fraud, because I'll be like, I'm not even writing
Right.
for myself at this point. I'm writing to make money and sell books to people who may or may not read my book. And then it's just, to me, like, that's what's the point? I want to tell the story I
Yeah.
want to tell, and whatever happens will happen. The market will decide if it wants it or not, and I'm willing to take that risk.
Well, I've heard that a lot about finding your audience too, but I think you make a good point. It's got to come on the how would I put this, on the back end. Like the writing comes first, and then it finds an audience. I think when you start out with, I'm going to market my writing to this audience. Well, there are people out there, I'm sure, who do that brilliantly and make a lot of money at it.
Hmm.
It sounds very cynical to me, and I don't want to insult those people. maybe I should do that, make some extra money. But I've thought about writing strictly genre without any heart in it before. Like that sells. Maybe I should write that. But I just know I'd be miserable going into it
Hmm.
because I wouldn't be authentic to myself even, and so it would be a
Yeah.
chore every day to go back into that world that I don't even like, that it doesn't even appeal to me, all for the cynical sake of making money. And nothing wrong with money, but we all say money isn't everything. But then, how do we behave when we have a chance to make money doing something that we shouldn't do or don't want to do? I don't want to be like that.
Hmm.
And it helps that I have a career. I've got the comfortability of tenured position, and for 25 years. So it's easy for me to say that, but I do think if you're true to yourself, as corny as that sounds, but I mean it in a very specific way. If you're writing what you know you need to write, you might envision an audience reading it, and that's fine. Everybody writes for a different sort of audience in their head. Maybe it's your own self. Doesn't matter. That's just as like subjective as anything. But yeah, you could write with an audience in mind to help motivate you. But once you start going, I'm going to pick this audience and that audience, and I'm going to tailor to them, you're just taking a chance on that inauthenticity creeping in, because you're starting the wrong way. You're starting with trying to please other people, instead of please yourself, and that's ultimately writing's a selfish act.
Yeah, I think I no, I think you're totally right. And my my last guest, Anna New, she has a YouTube channel and she is so passionate about what she does. And her and I were talking about her projects, and she's got one that she's had on the back burner, and she's like, "This is my favorite project, but I wanted to kind of start writing this other project because she thought maybe people would like it more." But I'm like, "You're getting," she's at like 30,000 subscribers, and she's getting comments from people saying that they like this project. It seems to be the most favorite one of the audience, the one that's also her favorite project. And I'm telling her, see, like that's really good. You've gotten this organic audience by talking about what you're doing on YouTube. I mean, you're targeting writers, obviously, of course, but you're not trying to, pick and choose specific writers or genre. She's just doing her own thing. She's just so passionate. She talks about what she's writing about, and you can see her love for it. And then I was like, but yeah, you've got comments, and your audience is saying we want to read that book. We want to hear more about it. And so like you can then write that book, and you already know that your audience is gonna like it, which I think is really really great. Like they've grown naturally. She hasn't had to like even do like, oh, maybe she has, but she hasn't had to like sit there and strictly do market research. She's just talked about what she likes, what she wants to do, and her audience is just growing and coming in naturally. So I think that's what I'm trying to keep in mind with like marketing for, my own self and on Instagram and everything, is just kind of still do the things that feel authentic to me and show my personality. And I think the people that resonate with that, they're going to stick with it. If they don't
Mhm.
like it, go follow someone else. You don't have to follow me. So I try to keep that in mind too.
Yes, and once you make that connection with an audience, then you can fine tune that, you can curate it, and in that way you're writing for an audience then, but it's an audience that already responds to what you're doing, so it's kind of a symbiosis there between that desire, give us more, and
Yeah.
and a writer in that position has freedom though to sometimes violate the expectations of their audience, and the audience will accept that even if it's not a success, they'll accept that to a certain degree. They'll accept that. Like if I have a filmmaker I love and they make a series of films I think are great, and they make one that is like, I'm not sure about this. This defies my expectations, what I wanted from them. Sometimes that works, and I'm like, wow, I'm glad they defied my expectations. Sometimes it doesn't, but I respect them. I feel that connection with them. I don't feel violated in the bad
Hmm.
way. I feel like that they are maybe pushing me out of my comfort zone and trying to take us other places creatively. I respect and admire that, even if it doesn't work. So I think when you get an audience and you're trying to now do that symbiotic thing with them, that involves a lot of times giving them what they want and giving them more of it, tweaking it so it's more of what they want, because it's also what you
Hmm.
want. Instead
Yes.
of a totally separated audience that you're trying to cynically draw in, you're instead going, "Oh, you like that? Well, let me get. Oh, you like it that way? Let me change it up a little then. But how about this? I'll throw you for a loop. See what you think of that." And it's this sort of fun give and take. So now you're writing for an audience in a different way than you would be if you were trying to unearth an audience just
Yes.
for practical reasons.
I completely agree with that. That's kind of my philosophy right now too. I'm gonna have to start growing my Instagram and everything, and a lot of the things that people do, they're like, oh, envision your target reader, and who are they? What do they read? What do they do? I'm just like, I'm my target reader again. I write for myself, and
Sure.
I'm just literally of the belief that whoever wants to read it and they like it, they will find it and they will stick around. The author of I think Eat, Pray, Love, when she wrote that book, she was saying like she apparently wrote like a love letter to her own writing, that she was going to do it no matter what. Like she was going to wait tables, she didn't care. She was going to do whatever she had to do to keep writing, and eventually she was like, people are eventually just going to find this and like it, and they'll stick with it. And that's just basically what happened. Like everyone that found the book loved it. She wrote what she wanted, and now she's gone with that, and it's been really good. So I like that philosophy more than just, okay, what's the hottest trending topic right now on book talk, and these what are the most popular tropes, and then write a book on that. Because yeah, I feel like that, like writing's hard enough as it is some days to sit in front of the computer and type for hours. I'm going to make it even harder on myself by writing something that I don't like. I don't want to do that to
No,
myself.
it doesn't sound fun.
Which then brings up my question though. So what do you think of like publishers then that are trying to do that? Because publishers now they're all, book talk and having an audience, and they want to market genres that are going to sell and to audiences that are going to buy that. Like what do you think of that? Are they kind of
Like,
ruining, let's just say, publishing? Are they forcing authors to do things maybe that they shouldn't be doing? What are your thoughts
I
on that?
mean, publishing, especially traditional publishing, which I mean like a label that you take your book to and they give you an advance and they market your book and they think, I mean, I would say that's what they've always been about. Is I mean that's a money making enterprise. So you take a writer sitting in a room somewhere, she may not necessarily have money for in front of her brain. Now, all of us as writers would go, I hope this makes it big. Would it be great if this was like the next big thing? I mean, I'm not above making money on my writing. Send it on, But at the same
Me
time,
too.
it's like, yeah. But at the same time, most of us don't start from that place, even if it's in our mind, even if we think, I got something here. When you get into it, when you delve, you're that person in a room, that lonely, terrifying act, second guessing yourself and trying to dial into authenticity, all the things we've talked about, right? That's
Mhm.
our primary motivation, even if money is on that slate. Whereas a publishing house, now, don't want to be too cynical. There are publishing houses that have tried to get good writing out there, world changing writing. I get that. But the reason they have a publishing house, they're not trying to break even, right? Their whole
Yeah.
goal is to make money. It's a business. And so I don't know that that's a new thing if they're focusing and stressing the business aspect of finding your audience. But it's like anything that's a creative thing, okay? Uh, that you can market versions of that. Like I love Bob Ross, right? But it's so comforting, right? And especially watching him do it. But they started these studios around the country, maybe around the world, I don't remember, where they just taught people to paint like that. And so yeah, it's comforting and it's a cool thing, but you're not coming up the next great painter isn't going to be the next great painter because they're painting a Bob Ross painting. So when publishers say, let's find the next big thing out there and let's find a way to dial it in with this writer, see if we can piggyback on them to make some money. Also, maybe change the world, sure, but we're a money making enterprise. But a lot of times, what happens is they just come up with derivative. They encourage derivative stuff, and they know that. I think if you cast out enough calls for derivativeness, I think that's an adjective. Then you're also, chances are you're going to, when you pull that net in, to switch the metaphor, when you pull that net in, maybe in the net is also some authentic writers, some people who are like stand above the fray and aren't just about a money making enterprise, even for the publishers. So I think it's natural for them to cast the net wide and say anybody can do this. All you got to do is find an audience. Well, technically that is true, yeah. But how are you finding that audience? And are you one of the people who can, they're out there who can pick a genre, and I don't mean this as an insult, but do a cynical version of it to sell and then sell big? There are people who do that, absolutely. And I guess are okay with themselves. I don't know. but I think most writers don't set out to go, you know what I'm going to do is I want to set out to be a writer because I want to be as mercenary as possible. I want to reduce all of my words to dollar signs. I mean, that's not what I think of. That's certainly not what I think of when I teach writing.
Yeah, I haven't met anyone like that yet.
Right. It would be interesting.
Oh, definitely, definitely not.
Well, I guess what I would say is that for publishers, it's a different definition of success. So they cast that net, they get money from these derivative things that they encourage and sponsor. So that's a success for them, and it should be. They're a business. But they also, when they come across that occasional writer who's more than that or different from that, that's a success too. Whereas on the writer's end, the success is defined sort of differently. Depends on what you're seeking. If you're just seeking riches, then as a writer, your definition of success would be narrow. But if you're looking to be a writer who hopefully makes money someday, then for you the successes hopefully are going to be the creative kind, with the monetary kind being the ones you catch in the net occasionally, and that you'll feel good about getting those. Whereas a publisher casts a wide net to make those dollars so they can stay in business, and they feel good about the occasional different writer that they find, if that makes sense.
I know, I see what you're saying, and I completely I understand what you're saying about derivative writers. And actually, I was reading an article from the Economic Times, which is an Indian English newspaper, and I want to bring that up because it's the topic. It might be a little sensitive, and some people are going to have some opinions. But there's an opinion piece written by an Indian guy, and he was saying that not everyone is a writer, despite what they think, and that publishing should be they should be more elitist and there should be more gatekeeping, specifically because of the influx of such, well, what he considers derivative and
Uh-huh.
just bad writing. And so he's saying that publishers should be this kind of quality control for like having he's literally said that like write like novels and publishers are losing their mystique and their dignity, and I was like, oof, these are tough words. But he's saying that, yeah, they should be the gatekeepers to good writing, especially kind of with, let's say,
I think
the growth of self-publishing, and literally anyone can write a book and everybody wants to write a book. So he's arguing that we should have this level of quality that needs to be met at the very least or surpassed before we as like, publishing houses publish those books. So what do you think about that?
Well, let me guess. He's the one to decide, I guess, and people like him. I mean, this is the problem with this sort of thing. Like, it's not even a new thing. When books first started to proliferate with the invention of the printing press, and when novels first started being written, there was a lot of cry about like, number one, if anybody can get books, then what's the special value of books? And then if anybody can be a writer, because it's easy to publish, back for them because you got a press. If anybody can be a writer, people will write. Everybody will write, and then what will happen? And then, by way of analogy, with our phones, my phone has portrait mode on it. I'm a terrible photographer. I don't consider myself a photographer, but I sometimes take pictures with that phone. I'm like, damn, that's a good photo. And so you hear people cry about that too. Like, oh my God, anybody can take a photo now. They act like it's ruining the photography business. Well, no, because if you are a photographer, it's about more than just your equipment. It's about the eye you bring to it and the discriminating taste, discriminating in terms of like what makes a good angle and what doesn't make a good angle and why, and the rule of thirds, and the golden ratio, and all these things that go into being a good photographer. The equipment is only one part of that. And so
Hmm.
I think it's gatekeeping and elitist in the bad way to say only certain people should be able to take camera phone photos. Why would we do that? Let everybody do it. I mean, so I say the fact that everybody can write is a good thing. And I think it's that same old knee jerk reaction that some people who aren't among the good people are going to be writing. And again, who judges that? And furthermore, many times in history, what was considered not good writing or trash turned out to revolutionize all of literature and the world. So if you had people up back then at various parts in history, and they were there, if they had won out saying this is a disgrace that anybody can write now, anybody can write anything, and they're wringing their hands. Meanwhile, there's some writer out there who's coming up with something terrific that nobody else thought to do, that they wouldn't be able to do if elitists had their way and said only certain people should be able to write. Well, that's what I think of it anyway. I'm
No,
passionate about such
I
ideas.
see where you're coming from. No, I'm kind of like, here's what I'm thinking about. So obviously, like, I think, like, we should bring up like writers who are good and have great stories and are
Sure.
good at their craft. They should be able to have that platform. Big publishing house, that's great. I think potentially where the problem is, what this the author of this article is saying is, for example, like this Lightlark book by Alex Astor. She became very popular on TikTok, and she just kind of blew up on TikTok. And now, because of that, some people think she got the movie deal because of that, or because she had like connections. It's like a whole nepotism story. Um, and so it's just like, I guess TikTok in a way is perpetuating not great novels, and because, then the algorithm sees that everybody's talking about this one bad novel, and then it just becomes even more popular and more people see it and they talk about it. Whereas the people who are actually writing good novels, they get lost in the algorithm. I heard somebody else talk about even like a race thing about how algorithms are racist. I really want to have a conversation about that with that author, so we'll see what that happens. But like, it's just like POC authors are getting lost in the algorithm. Actual good authors are getting lost in the
Sure.
algorithm. And what's getting boosted then is this derivative nonsense that either the person's got a really good, tactic on TikTok on how to get attention for people. And so then it's like maybe that's where publishers then could come in and realize, okay, yeah, this book's popular on TikTok, author's popular on TikTok, we could make money off the audience, but who are we as a brand then? Do we want to be the publishing house that kind of perpetuates publishing for the sake of publishing so we can make money, or do we want to, like you said, have the good author and still make money, but we're also known for kind of having this higher standard of what we put out into the world?
Okay, so I guess I have some thoughts on that. Number one, yes, anytime there's any change in how we do art as a species, everything goes topsy turvy, and people do get lost in the shuffle. So people copying things by hand in the 1300s and the 1400s, that might have stood out more because who's copying things by hand, so their stuff can get to more people, and you have a brilliant writer whose stuff can get out there, and then the printing press comes along, and yes, a lot of those people are going to be lost in the flood of everybody writing and publishing things. That's unfortunate, but it's one of those things that's impossible to stand in front of. It just happens that way. And so, I think is interesting in history is to see what rises from once the dust settles on that change. What rises out of that? And I think something always does. It seems to be the process, that tearing down and rebuilding. There's always growing pains. We're going to lose some good voices that way. Secondly, I would say those publishing houses that want to just cash in on the latest derivative thing could go make a publishing house and make their money. Publishing houses that want to focus on more finding that nugget, finding that original voice, they can do their thing. Are they going to make as many millions and billions as the others? Probably not. But then I'm not a business person. There may be ways to structure your business where you can still make a lot of money digging at the gems. I don't know that end of it from the publishing end of things, but I don't know that people have to stop trying to find the gems just because there are people doing derivative stuff. Let all operate ferry boats who will, to quote Alan Watts, and let those people make the money off their derivative stuff if they want. Okay, so also I would say that so back to the camera phone camera. I'm so old. The analogy of people taking pictures on their phones. So let's say, okay, so yeah, anybody can just take pictures, and the internet is just flooded with people putting their shitty pictures up all over the place. And so okay, but what about that person? I'm sorry. Take that again. What about that person out there who had no idea they were interested in photography or had the talent or the eye for it? And because the phones have proliferated, they pick up a phone, they start taking photos along with everybody else. But as they're doing that, they discover they're drawn to it, or that they have an original way of doing it, or they have something to quote say, whatever you would call that in photography. They have an original eye. They get into it because of this proliferation, which could be seen as a negative thing, absolutely. But because of that, we discover people who would not have been discovered otherwise. So by way of analogy, everybody can publish a book now. So you're publishing crap, 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 and then all of a sudden there's somebody who pops up who never would have tried publishing before, but they'll try it now because it's easier to do. And so you do have original voices. So you're getting the original voices from other places. So the negative, I think, negative version of that would be like, well, since we've opened the floodgates, all we're going to get is crap from people. Well, that's a pretty dim view of humanity. That the more people who are into something, the worse it has to be. And I know that plays out sometimes in the media. I'm not saying that's never true, but I don't know that we need to limit ourselves that way either.
I see where you're coming from, and I think you're definitely correct in that it has provided more opportunity for people. Maybe someone is a really good writer, but they don't get picked up traditionally, so they have the chance to self-publish. There are many self-published authors who are extremely successful, and we wouldn't have known that otherwise because they wouldn't have gone traditional. So I think you're right. I I think the marketplace will decide. That's the beauty of capitalism, in my opinion, is we're always getting sold a bunch of stuff, but we have the ability to think critically and search for other things, especially with social media. Like you can go
Mhm.
search for whatever you want. Somebody is doing it out there. very rarely that anyone's the first person for anything, but you might be, and then you can just find exactly what it is that you're looking for because there's this opportunity for everyone to share what they're passionate about.
Yeah. Well, take the healthy form of capitalism as an analogy, right? So if you're trying to make money any way you can make money, then sometimes good ideas are going to come out of that from this very. Um, I kind of lost my train of thought. Dang it! I hate when that happens. But I think go back to the publishing topic. Like the first thing I mentioned, which is that history happens this way sometimes, where there's an overturning and chaos and how things have been done, and but history, notice that it always like you have to just deal with that. Like there's no standing against, there's no stopping it, and that's sort of the shutting down mentality. That's where the capitalism analogy was. Like I could just shut down and go, there's no way that I can't fight this tide. Like what do capitalists? Okay, people who are successful at capitalism often is innovation, which comes out of things changing in a way that they can't get what they want the way they used to get it. And so, what do? Instead of bemoaning that everything has changed, they look for a way to innovate in the face of that change, and they come up with new products. So, yeah, we can have publishers and people who are publishing philosophers and stuff who bemoan the state of things, which it is different. I mean, if you ask people 20 years, 30 years after the printing press was invented to assess their own situation, to understand how it had changed the world, there'd be no way they could know. They're too in the middle of it. That's the way we are with technology. TikTok is just a passing thing, like they all are. That we're still trying to understand this connectivity that we have in a global sense. So we really don't know what we don't have the benefit of looking back from history the way we do at the printing press, which is still changing things. It was like a world changer. I think the internet is the same way. So to assess where we are in it and to be definitive about that, I think is pretty. It's hubris in the bad way. So I think that's part of the hubris is going, oh, everything has changed, and let's bemoan that without taking the extra step of going, well, now then we just have to look in different ways. We have to now deal with what we have, which is this overturning of everything we're used to, and let's see what we can pick out of that that takes us in a new direction. You know?
I love that. I love your mentality of you're right. That's what capitalism is. It's just like you people solve problems and they find a way to monetize it because people are willing to buy the solutions to those problems. And that's really all it is. I mean, today capitalism in like North America, honestly, it's not capitalism, it's corporatism. That's a whole separate issue though. But at the core of it, capitalism is basically just like you said, innovation, solving problems. The industry for sure is changing in publishing. Like 20 years ago you didn't have TikTok and Instagram and YouTube to self promote, to find authors. So it's changed the landscape. I think you're right, in a way that we're not even going to fully understand for maybe another
Mm-hmm.
20 years, 30, 40, 50
At
years. And
least,
who knows,
yeah.
the tech is constantly changing. There's going to be a 20 other social media platforms that come up or some other sort of tech, and we're just going to have to go with the times. And some people don't want to go with the times, and that's okay, but then they kind of get left behind as well. So I mean
Well,
that's
it's yeah, like the person in the Industrial Revolution who had a factory that made widgets, and all of a sudden everything changes, and nobody wants the widgets anymore. So they get mad and go, people used to like widgets, and I understand a world of widgets, and then, but you've got all this factory equipment, you've got all this experience, you've got a building. Maybe you could look for a way to use it for something else. I mean, what happens to people in capitalism when they bemoan but don't take any steps to find where their place is in that change? They are obsolete. They go away. Their stuff goes away. And I think it's similar in these kind of things where technology is changing creativity. There are guitar players out there, I'm sure, who are so amazing you wouldn't believe it, but they're getting lost in everything. It's the music industry has changed in my lifetime in a pretty major way. I mean, it seems like, yes, technology has changed and is changing how we are creative, how we put that creativity out there, who gets to be heard and why. And it sometimes can feel very chaotic, and even to the point where like, oh my God, is everything ruined? Have we lost a way of being? But I generally am resistant to things used to be better mentality. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But it's too easy to get lost in the nostalgia of just remembering the good ways things used to be and kind of ignoring that things used to suck in a lot of ways. And a lot of times, this innovation and change that's so uncomfortable brings about positive things that we have trouble seeing because we're so longing for the old way of doing things.
Yes, and like you said, or we're like just stuck in the middle of it. We can't really see the end point, the way forward, and then we only see the way back because we've already gone through it. I
Right.
You mentioned the creative space is changing in general in every single medium. Have you seen those pictures of artificial intelligence that's now making artwork? I've seen a few of them.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that? We're officially going to have to start competing with AI, maybe? Like,
I don't know. I haven't yet decided what I think of it. Honestly, I'm sort of like just existing as an observer of it at the time because it's so new, and it brings up questions of the value of creativity and the point of creativity and the process of creativity. And I guess I feel now if I had to say something about it, I'd say it's just a separate thing. It's like
mhm.
it's like it's art created by a machine, which is its own category because we are not machines. So as you can see, I don't have fully developed thoughts on it yet. Do I think it's if I had to put it in terms of is it a good thing or a bad thing? I would go back to what I was saying before. Like to me, it seems irrelevant, honestly, because it's like you're not going to stop that. Nobody's going to one day go, you know what, guys, we've got too much technology. Let's shut everything down. I mean, it would take cataclysm to arrest the changes technology has brought upon us. So I don't know that I mean, whether I think AI art is a good or bad thing in some ways is irrelevant. So more of the question to me is like, what what does this do to our understanding of art? I find it a very challenging question.
I think we're still again very beginning stages and we don't know where the
Mm-hmm.
end point is. I know some people are freaking out about it thinking that oh this is the end of human creativity. You know, machines are gonna, they're gonna take over and we're not gonna be able to compete with them. But I like this idea that you mentioned that it's just a separate category. We don't have to compete against the machines. I guess if it comes down to it, you've got this AI. Okay, you're gonna have a museum of AI generated art, and then you're gonna have another museum with human made art. Also, I've read some tech articles. I'm not super familiar with AI, but a lot of tech people who are more in the field like to say that we're still not that far along with AI. Like everything that AI is still doing is very basic. It still requires a
Mm-hmm.
lot of human input. And so I guess even what the AI is doing is in a way still very human based because it's learning. Like if you give it pictures of Monet and Van Gogh and Rembrandt and Da Vinci, and it's just going to take all this human made information and just smush it all together and make a new thing, which kind of like you said we're all influenced from one another. So it's like if I look at
Sure.
100 paintings and then try to make my own painting, am I copying other people? Have I been entirely creative because I made a new painting? Or is it just, I have no actual original thought because I looked at 100 other paintings and then I made my, like, it's subjective. I think there is a very subjective topic, and AI is still very much learning, like, it's still very much
Mm-hmm.
learning from humans, and I mean, it's not sentient in any way, so it's just, I guess, another regurgitation of human data, potentially.
Well, I think too of like I don't remember the exact story. I didn't know it would come up today. I would have looked into it more. But I remember reading about this ancient shield making technique of a metal shield that ancient craftspeople used to have a very particular way of doing. And over time, technology developed where you could make this shield without the use of all these ancient techniques. And
Mhm.
so a craft was lost to history. Nobody can do this anymore, this shield making technique, which is you could tell it's done by hand. As you can see, it's been a while since I've read this, but nobody it's lost. The craft is lost. Everybody knew how to do it is
Yeah.
dead. It's gone. And that's I think that's a legitimately lamentable thing
Mhm.
However, what let's look at the let's play devil's advocate on the other end here. The reason it went away is because the product that was needed could be made without that craft. Even though the craft was a beautiful thing unto itself, a shield is a very practical thing. It needs to work a certain way, and if you can accomplish that with machinery and technology, then from a practical standpoint, do you need the craftsmanship anymore? So, I don't think AI is anywhere close to replacing what we get from human made art. So I don't think human made art is going to go away like that shield making technique, because not yet anyway. We haven't figured out how to replace that certain something about human art, the choices that go into it and the reflection of our values and our comments we make that are very much like symbol mongering creatures making art, not like AI, which is more, it can follow orders and fill in the blank and paint by numbers and stuff like that. Even skew those things in interesting ways. That's still not creativity. They're still responding to, well, human made things. They're responding to human made art, and they're using human made cues to manipulate that art. And so I just don't know that not in our lifetimes anyway, is it going to replace. I don't see how it could, because the need, that yearning to make art and to partake of the art of other humans is still there and can't be replaced by a machine. Not yet, anyway.
You're right. That just made me think how we were speaking in the beginning. You called it an obsession. I called it an affliction, and it's we have these feelings since we're kids. Honestly, we're the kids that love to read, and then take a dip into writing, and some of us get really gripped by it, and then we just keep doing it. AI is not like that. An AI machine isn't created, and it has this desire to, I'm going to be a doctor, or like now they're talking about like robots helping with surgeries. I'm going to be a surgeon, or I'm going to work in an Amazon warehouse shipping out boxes of you know I don't know, bunch of random crap that people ordered and need out by tomorrow. Or it doesn't have that same desire
Mm-mm.
or need that we do. Doesn't have this need for creative expression, because like you said, yeah, it just responds to what we put into it. It's not
Well,
in any way doing anything on its own.
yeah, if you had a typewriter and put corn on specific keys, a chicken could peck out a short story. But
Mhm.
is that chicken sitting around one day in bed and going, "What if this guy lived on another planet?" And all of a sudden gets up and I got to write that down? No,
Yeah.
they're just pecking where we told them to peck. So
Mhm.
it's not that easy to just imitate the creative process. The output of the creative process is much easier to imitate. The actual creative process, by definition, can only come from being creative, and
Yeah.
so far AI cannot create in that way. I don't know if they ever will be able to.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. Probably won't happen in our lifetime as well. But yeah, it's I guess that goes into, will it ever become sentient? If we feed it enough human information, thoughts, feelings, artwork, mathematics, will it eventually kind of figure it all out and become sentient? I somehow don't think so, because I think our own human biology is millions of years old, and the tech has been around for what, like 20 years, 50 years
Yeah.
max. So it might take just as long for an AI to evolve to that point. I mean, I know people will
Well,
argue
and you're
that.
talking.
Sorry, I was just gonna
Sorry.
say, I know it might take. It might. They say it goes faster. Like an AI is gonna learn a lot faster than a human will.
Right.
But yeah, I have a feeling that it's still gonna take a really, really long time for it to get anywhere near the full human capacity.
I think you're right. I just don't think that we have to worry about that anytime soon because of the nature of creativity. Yeah. I don't think. I think we don't even understand what consciousness is, and we are conscious. Like, I don't know
Yes.
if you've heard that the actual term that philosophers have and theoretical physicists for consciousness. Do you know what kind of problem they call that? It's very highfalutin, fancy terms. Do you know what they
I
call
feel
it?
like I should know this because I did a philosophy minor and a neuroscience degree, and I don't know this term, or maybe I'll know it when you remind me.
Well, I know it because it makes me laugh. And they call it the hard problem. That's the official name for what is consciousness. It's called the hard problem
Okay, yeah.
because all we know is we're experiencing it. That's all we know about consciousness. Even if we're a
Yeah.
brain in a jar somewhere, we're experiencing consciousness. That's all we understand about it. So to think we could program something into machines that we don't even understand ourselves, it's kind of far fetched. And secondly, that to think that a machine could evolve consciousness. I mean, it took us, like you said, billions of years. I mean, even if machines went really, really fast, it's got to be at least a billion years, I would think, to achieve some sort of what we would think of as consciousness, enough to be creative. You know?
Yes, yes, that's so true. I mean, my one of my favorite things when I did my neuroscience degree was when I'd read my textbook and they would describe a function of something and be like, "Oh, so this particular system of, let's say, neurotransmission, I don't know, or how the brain communicates." They're like, "Oh, it works like this, but we don't know how." And we don't know why it
Right.
does it this way and not a
Hmm.
different way. And it was like really, it was really
Yeah.
great to see that. I'm like, I'm reading a $300 textbook and half of it says they don't know how or why it does this. Like that's, you know, so
Yeah.
like you said, we
Even
don't
language
even
we don't
know,
understand.
right? Like even we don't know what is going on in our own heads, not fully. We're a
Yeah.
very, very long way away from figuring it all out. So I think by the time we figure out our own brains and then input it into an AI that's then going to figure it out, it's probably going to be a really long time.
And we will have changed. We will have evolved also. Of the time it's
Yes.
going to take for that to happen, we will be evolving also. Who knows where we'll be as a species? That's one of the things that I find amusing about us humans is we always think we've arrived at okay. In the past, they didn't understand physics and technology. We understand it now. Well, I mean, there was a conference held in like 1900. I forget which philosopher I was listening to talk about this, where they officially declared it was some science organization that we have discovered everything there is to discover. Well, that was 1900, and clearly they hadn't discovered everything. It's like this weird tendency of humans. It's like we go, social media has ruined humans. We had our chance at the internet. We messed it up. Oh well, everything's ruined. I'm like, well, you seem to be ready to stop more than I am. Like to me, it's like we're still going. We don't know where this is going. It could turn out to be the most beneficial thing to ever happen to human beings, and we're just going through growing pains right now. I guess I'm a pie-eyed optimist. I don't know, but I don't see why it can't be that way. I mean, we exist right now because evolution provided a lot of accidents and things go in ways which are unpredictable, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, we survived a lot throughout human history for sure. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, everyone's been dead since, but you know, a lot of people had to
Yeah,
die in the process. Those that were stronger survived. And I mean, the internet too. The internet's been around for what, like from 25 years, like in the grand
more than
scheme
that,
of
but not with
things.
the public. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm thinking like from the 90s when people were actually able to start
right.
using it and do some
Yeah.
basic web searches, you know, for it's that's only, yeah, like you said, 20, that's maybe that 25 years, like that since the 50s maybe is when they really started it. But it's gonna keep changing. It's changed in the last even decade. We have no idea where it's going or where it's headed. We don't know the end game. And I think you're right, it's silly to stop like like at the beginning of this idea, when it's just like, oh yeah, oh, there people like to troll other people and shit post on Twitter a lot. Okay, I mean, if that's the peak of the internet,
We're in trouble.
we're in trouble. Like I would like to think that the internet has got a lot more to offer than you know, people saying dumb stuff on Twitter or on whatever other platform. I don't know, people posting like naked pictures of themselves on Instagram. Like I have more faith in what we can provide to each other on this world, in this
And we
world.
gotta figure it out. We got to figure it out. And any technology, you're going to have a lot of, how do I put it? Non-thinking people are also going to use it. Like,
Hmm.
by any given metric, half of the population is below average. So when it comes to critical thinking and being responsible, like half the population is going to be terrible at it. So yeah, you're going to have a lot of nonsense, of course. You know, when Facebook first started, what I said is if you put a megaphone in the middle of town square and said anybody can come say anything and they want into it, smart people will say smart things, dumb people will say dumb things, idiots will
Yeah.
say idiotic things, rude people will say rude things. It's not the megaphone that's the problem. It's not the difference. Humanity is humanity, and we're always going to have this give and take of people going crazy and chaotic and not knowing what they're doing and doing bad things, and but also again what rises out of that, unless we destroy ourselves first. So what rises out of that is innovative things, new things, interesting things, humanity changing things, you know.
Yes, and that makes me think of another thing, and that, well, that too. It's like there's so much stuff out there. People need to think critically and assess everything that they view critically. And which I was actually reading another article where this neuroscientist, his name is Rich. I want to say Richard something. His last name starts with an R, like Rensack or something like that. I
Okay.
cannot remember it right now, but he was saying about memory. One of the best ways that people can kind of preserve their memory as they're getting older, and one way is to read fiction books, because fiction books, reading one involves a lot of memory. If the character does something on page 3, you have to know what they're doing on page
Right.
11.
No
You have
index.
to, yeah, you have to pay attention to what's going on, so that when you get to the end you're like, oh, why is this character doing this thing, if you don't remember what the hell just happened from page 1. And so I wanted to ask you, I mean, when I tell people I'm a writer, they're like, oh, that's nice, that's great. But like nobody really reads books anymore. Like it's going to be really hard to do that because nobody wants to read books anymore. And like, why is that? Leaf, tell me, why does nobody want to read books? Any ideas? Even though the benefits are so numerous, all the studies have shown, why are people not reading books anymore? Do you have any
I
thoughts,
don't
any
know that that's
ideas?
true. Yeah, I don't. I would need to see some evidence of that. I think that probably the same proportion of people who were reading books before are still reading books. Like so. For instance, I listen to books a lot. I walk a lot, and I
Mhm.
love listening to podcasts and books. I don't mind listening to a book. I think it's the same as reading a book. It exercises different skills, but I mean, I've been reading professionally for 25 years. I think I'm fine by now. So
Yeah.
listening to a book to me is reading a book. And I think, yes, there is more of an emphasis on shorter form reading. But again, I think it comes back to this cynical view of humanity that for some reason we were all just captive to books because there was nothing else. And now that we've got
Mhm.
all this proliferation of short form and Twitter and TikTok, then we're all like, oh, good, we can stop reading books now. Well, I don't think that that's the case. I think people who want to read still read. I mean,
Yeah.
how they consume the information is different. And did we lose some book readers who got lured away by the siren call of short form? Sure, there's always attrition in any change, you know. But
Mhm.
as a general rule, I'm skeptical that people don't read books anymore. And I read a lot of short form, but I think it's because I've been grading essays for so long. I love magazine. Like I read magazine and news articles all day. I just every
Yeah.
time I'm in between things, I'm like I can speed read an article, you know. But that doesn't mean, you know, maybe I'm not reading as many books as I used to. I don't know that that's true, but if it were, I'm still reading. Like I don't know. It's like book reading exercises different muscles in the brain. It's true. But
Yes.
again, I'm not sure people are reading books less. And even if they are, I'm not sure it's a catastrophe so much as just a shift.
That's I mean I like that. That makes me feel better, cuz then I'm like I can write my book and I know someone's going to read it out there. And well, yeah, again, book talk is a great example that there is a dedicated group of people who want to read, and they're pushing books out there, they're pushing their thoughts
Mhm.
out there. YouTube, the amount of writer tubers growing on YouTube is just, there's more and more every single day. I'm constantly seeing new people that have 400 subscribers, 500 subscribers, because they haven't been around that long. I've followed some newer people, they're already at a few thousand subscribers. So people are interested, they're interested in what they're writing, they're interested in seeing their writing process and what they're working on. So I think, again, yeah, if people want to write and they want to read, you're going to find that audience. If I know nothing about building cars, I have never in my life looked at anything about building cars, and I don't care about it. But there's a dedicated group of people who
Sure.
think that buying old cars and fixing them up and selling them is a good use of time. I don't understand that in any form, but there's some like, I don't understand, why are you buying like this ancient like dinosaur of a car and fixing it up, but apparently it's a one of a like, I don't know. But
And
there's a
nothing can
community
stop
for,
them. Yeah.
right? There's a
Sure.
community for everything. Like it's
Mhm.
it's you're gonna find that community, and I get that's the nice thing with social media. It's making it easier to find that community.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a friend in the '80s. I know her now, but she was telling me in the '80s she a new Stephen King book came out, and I don't remember which book, but it was coming out in New York first, and she got
Mhm.
on a plane and flew to New York to get that book because she didn't want to wait for it to make its way around the U.S. Like Karen, my friend Karen is not going to stop reading books no matter what. You could like threaten her and she wouldn't stop reading books. Like, and she's an older person, but I think that translates. I think there are people out there of all ages who want books and
Mhm.
they want long form. They want to follow a plot in a novel. They want to read long nonfiction books. And I just don't think that technology is going to put a dent in that really. Again, what are these people? Have they been waiting to be freed from reading books? No, they read books because they want to.
Yes, yes. Oh, and like you said, people that want to, they'll do it. And I've heard some interesting things about podcasts, like with TikTok is short videos, even Instagram Reels are short videos. YouTube's got the shorts now, but the popularity of podcasts has grown so much and is still grown because the marketplace has shown that people value having long form conversations and people value listening to those. In like
Yeah,
in 2010, if someone made a 2 hour podcast, like almost no one would listen to it because they're like, oh, who
yeah,
am I going to listen for to talk for 2 hours straight? Like, I don't care that much. But now all podcasts are like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. I've listened to a 5 hour podcast before. I'll be
yeah.
honest.
I have
Because I
too.
found it interesting. I'm cooking in the background, I'm doing whatever, and I'm just like, I'm listening to an intelligent conversation. I want to hear what people have to say, and I seek that out. And again, if it wasn't popular and people didn't want to do that, it wouldn't happen. All podcasts would be 10 minutes and that'd be it. I actually, if a
Right.
podcast is 10 minutes, I actually don't like to listen to it because I'm like, no, I need the fullness of, I need
Yes.
context, I need everything. Like if it's less than
Yes.
like 40 minutes, I don't
Yeah.
think I'm gonna listen to it, to be
I'm
honest.
right there with you.
So I mean, that's the beauty again. The market will decide what it wants, and
Hmm.
again, if I guess if you know how to sell what the market wants, or sell it in a way that you makes the market think that they want it, then you're good to go.
Right.
But Leaf, I wanted to thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I have
Well, thank you
thoroughly
for having
enjoyed
me.
our conversation, and
Same.
you have dropped some gems for us, especially us new and aspiring writers. And I'm so thankful to
Good.
have you as my mentor and just taking such good care of my book and reading it. So thank you again
Excellent.
for your
Do you
time.
mind if I do a couple of self promotions before I go?
Absolutely. I was gonna get you. Where can we find you? All the stuff we want to know.
Well, I'm Leif Erickson on Facebook, and I have a writing blog, but I've gotten so involved in other things, which I'll talk about in a second, that I haven't updated it recently. But it's Leif Erickson Writes .com, and it's called The Last Words of Leif Erickson, actually, but the website is leifericksonwrites.com. And then what I've been putting most of my efforts into lately is doing instructional videos that are fun on TikTok at prof.leaf.erickson at TikTok. prof.leaf.erickson. I did that poorly. Old man trying to promote his TikTok.
Don't worry. I'm gonna have
prof.leaf.erickson.
I'm gonna have some show notes. I'm gonna have all
Okay,
your links down below, and people will be
good.
able to search you. Don't worry.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Well, I've really appreciated and enjoyed this. So I do thank you for having me on, and I would love to come on again.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're definitely gonna have get more guests coming on. They're good conversations. I want to have repeat guests, and as the podcast grows, I'm very excited to see where this is going to end up. And thank you for
Excellent.
your time and the good conversation. It's well appreciated.
Good. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Right Opinion podcast.